Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. We have a relatively small group. I think everyone is scared of the impending storm. That's not gonna shape up to be much maybe, but we have an attempt at hybrid today. So we have some folks here in Decorah as well as the Zoom live. And want to thank Kerri Johannsen for joining us, Energy Policy Lead for Iowa Environmental Council, and chief lobbyist and an energy thinker. Hopefully she will walk us through the main energy bills that the Environmental Council has in their tracker, and that we and the various energy organizations around the state are all working on. And then I can jump in with comments as necessary. We might have questions from the audience as we go, and we'll move sort of from topic to topic in the main bills. Are you there, Kerri?
I am here.
All right, take it away.
All right, so it's been a very busy legislative session this year after a couple of years of maybe a little bit slower when it comes to energy bills. So I'm going to start off with a bill that's pretty far down the process already. Senate File 198. There's also a companion House file, but that one is already through the full House. So I'm going to concentrate on Senate File 198 because that is the one that is still sort of out there and could come to the Senate for debate at any moment, really, though we understand that, given that we're 2 weeks out from funnel, it's unlikely there's going to be a lot of floor debate in the next 2 weeks. So because that bill is on the floor next, it probably won't come up for debate until after funnel. So that's just something to think about. So Senate File 198 is a bill that would remove the requirement that the utilities submit plans every 2 years about how they're going to meet federal air quality requirements. And the reason that that's been something that they've been required to do in the past, is that these are often really substantial investments that the utilities have to make, and there are a variety of ways that they could go about making them. So, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of investment in these coal plants. And we know from an environmental perspective as well, the more money you put into these old coal plants, the more money then they have to earn back from rates, and the longer that they're likely to stay on the system, versus is there a less expensive way to do this? Should they be shut down and replaced with renewable energy versus staying on the system? So that bill, like I said, went through the House. And right now, we have an action alert out. Hopefully many of you have seen that we're trying to hammer home on the fact of what the bill actually does. It's being misstated and misconstrued it was misstated and misconstrued by folks in the House, and I've heard the same thing happening in the Senate. So just trying to get the facts straight. Anything on that bill, Andy, or anyone?
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth just a couple minutes of discussion about how this fits essentially in the scheme of deregulation that Mid-American especially seems to be pushing.
Yeah.
They've got some pretty good control of state politics right now, and they feel like now's the time. And there aren't, we are a utility regulated state, but there aren't a lot of levers actually where either the regulators, the utility board, or the public has oversight or sight into the operations of a Mid-American and Alliant. And this is one of the few, right? I mean, apart from, say, rate cases and one or two other things, there are not many times when the utility needs to come before the public and the regulators. And so this is one of the few remaining. And so that's why this is really a sort of a big push at deregulation. It's not just the specifics of this, we don't want to talk about the economics of coal plants. It's a little bit bigger than that. And it ties in then, of course, with another bill that we're waiting for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a pattern of both, deregulation, and that tied with just like loosening of consumer protection. I mean, it goes hand in hand when you have a monopoly utility, right? So the less regulation you have, the more customers are the ones, especially small customers, are the ones who don't have a say and end up paying the price. Okay. And yeah, and I can talk a little bit about what is being called the Innovative Rates Bill. This is a bill that the Iowa Business Energy Coalition is bringing, that we haven't actually seen the language yet. We haven't, and I know things are really slow at the Capitol in terms of drafting bills. So it could be this, just that it's taking forever in drafting. But the bill would basically allow Mid-American and Alliant to make deals with large customers. You know, the bill is for special rates to meet certain objectives. So the bill is being talked about as if it could help any customer class, and that's theoretically true. But it was also described to us as the expectation that, you know, a big customer, you know, someone like ADM or, you know, potentially, you know, just someone who uses a whole lot of energy would work with the utilities to say, okay, well, we're trying to reach this particular goal when it comes to 100% renewable energy. And so we're going to have our very own rate and setup that we're going to bring to the board along with Mid-American or Alliant to get this special rate and meet these goals. But the bill is really wide open. It doesn't just talk about renewable energy. It talks about things like renewable natural gas, hydrogen, and LNG. And so, and the way that it's worded, it's just so broad, you could basically drive a truck through it. So we're just really concerned that some of these large customers are going to, you know, be able to make deals with Mid-American for clean energy or Alliant, or to really sort of escape from their expensive system and have their own little deal over here, while the rest of us end up paying for the system that's left. And, you know, I really think if you have a utility that's really focused on, okay, what does Facebook want? What does John Deere want, et cetera? And how can we meet that? And is, you know, taking renewable energy projects and shifting them towards that goal versus building renewables for everybody for their system. Like, that's where I have a lot of concern, especially given that it's becoming harder and harder to build more renewables in Iowa. So I think if a utility is focused on building renewables, it should be building renewables that benefit its entire system and all the people on its system, and not just focused on a few big customers. So that's where we're concerned. But like I said, we haven't seen that introduced yet. I do still expect to see it. You know, we really think that if the legislature is going to do something like this, one way to fix it would be to couple it with planning. So there's a true up at the end of the day. So yes, if you have, you know, certain customers who are wanting to meet these particular goals and they're able to work with the utility to meet those goals, maybe that's fine, as long as the utility is also being held accountable to the rest of its customers at the end of the day. And that's what Iowa law doesn't currently. There's nothing in the processes at the IUB, like Andy was talking about, to really do that second part where it's like, where is the true up? Like, where is the protection for the rest of the customers at the end of the day?
Which that integrated resource planning was introduced as a bill. And so a hopeful effort anyway, and it hasn't gone anywhere yet, but you know, if one, then maybe the other, right? So certainly when folks are having conversations with policymakers, you know, hey, if the utility really wants this, then we, the people, kind of need the other. Linking these two things makes a lot of sense, including to some of our policymakers. So
yep. Absolutely. And I know that the idea of resource planning continues to come up and be brought up by folks. And so it's good to keep having that conversation, even though, or maybe especially because utilities hate it so much. But yeah, it's good to know folks are interested in that. All right, Andy, did you have any, I have a list of other bills. Did you have other things that were at the top of your list that you wanted to make sure we talked about today?
Those were the two big ones, the deregulation efforts. And then, of course, there are a couple of citing bills and there's the reorganization, all the other issues. I think you can go ahead and start on walking down unless anyone has questions about these initial two. Go ahead and drop them in the chat if so, and we'll hit them.
So in other words, do I understand, they were terribly concerned about cost shifting when it came to solar, but they're not concerned about cost shifting when it comes to Google?
Good way to put it.
We hit the nail on the head, Amy.
To make sure I understood what you were saying.
Right. Who's going to pay for all of the rest of this stuff? And especially because we're not talking about, 1 megawatt and under, a small project. We're talking about hundreds of megawatts. So yes.
Who's going to pay and who's going to benefit?
Yeah.
Because, big business wants to be squeaky clean and they want to be able to show, that they're all green and have no carbon emissions from their power. But if the benefits of the renewable builds go to the Googles and the Microsofts, then the rest of us are left with the dirty power. So.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when there's the subcommittee on the planning bill and the IBEC group of large customers said that they didn't think we needed planning right now. They didn't think it was necessary. And then came back and said, oh, but we want, are coming back and saying, oh, but we want this innovative rates proposal. To me, it looks like, I like to call it like the private island bill. Like we're going to go and, find our own private island where we have clean energy and we're going to, go live over there while the rest of you are stuck over here paying for this dirty system. So it's like an escape hatch for them, both from a cost and a benefit standpoint. And so to carry on from that, then I wanted to hit on the government reorganization bill, which is in the House, is House Study Bill 126. And comb through stuff as I might, I could not find the Senate file number. So I apologize for that. But the House Study Bill is in subcommittee this week, every day this week. And I believe Representative Bloomingdale is leading that subcommittee process. So that's where Steve Falk is today. He was supposed to be on the meeting, but he's there. So what that bill would do is to really make some changes to the OCA, the Office of Consumer Advocate, that we find troubling. The OCA is an intervener in all dockets before the Utilities Board. They are supposed to represent customers, and they have done a darn good job of it from our perspective. And so what this bill would do is, first of all, it would take the position from being an appointed position, a 4-year appointee confirmed by the Senate. Initially, this position, the consumer advocate, the head of the office, is appointed by the Attorney General and then confirmed by the Senate and serves for a 4-year term. It would make it so that this person would serve at the pleasure of the Attorney General. And then it would also say that this person does not have to be an attorney, even though throughout the statute it talks about how this person is supposed to represent the interests of consumers in court and at the IUB and all of these very legal places. And then one of the other things that's really, that I really don't like is that it removes merit protections from the employees of the Office of Consumer Advocate. So right now, there's a process you have to go through if you want to let somebody go from their job. And so this would take away, everyone would just be at will. The engineers and economists and all the folks who work at OCA would be at will. And rather than reporting to the consumer advocate, they would they would report directly to the Attorney General. So it's really this politicization and concentration of power with the Attorney General that we think could be really damaging, considering how much political power we know that the utilities have. So we're going to be working really hard with other folks who care about consumers to try to get these pieces stripped away, or at least some of them.
I don't see one in the Senate on your bill tracker page. Is
Yeah.
there? Are you sure there is one?
It's
'Cause
odd. I have to find that out because I swear that I thought that they already went through their subcommittee process over there, but maybe I was dreaming. So I'll have to check into that. All right. Okay, and then a few things in addition to that. A bill that I think just came out late last week, perhaps, Senate File 332, the virtual net metering bill. This is another one that was introduced by Senator Klimisch, and it would allow people to, well, they're calling it a cooperative, to form like a distributed generation cooperative where something like a group of, like a campus or a city or a group of farmers could get together and have one solar array where the production would go against all of their bills. There are limits placed on this. I haven't actually read through the bill thoroughly yet. I assume it's pretty similar to what was introduced last year, that went down pretty quickly. But it would add some flexibility to let some of these campus type folks, or maybe one person doesn't have a great location for solar, but they could join up with others who might have the land for it. Of course, the utilities are going to be very much against this, which really makes not a lot of sense to me. But yeah, so we'll see how that goes. And then the other one that I saw come out just yesterday was Senate File 334. And this bill would eliminate the state energy code. Rollbacks to the energy code are something that the home builders have been working on for a number of years, and every year they come at it sort of a different way. So this bill by Senator Webster out of the Quad Cities would just do away with the code altogether. And yeah, obviously we're going to be opposed to this one. There are definitely good reasons why we have an energy code. He is a home builder, and I think what we've heard from him and from the home builders on this is that this is all being driven by manufacturers, and it's not really about saving people money. It's about just making people live the way you think they should live, which is like, yeah, I would like to live in a house with low energy bills. That would be fantastic. So I think that from what we understand, Senator Webster has introduced a number of bills in this sort of kind of extreme frame. This is his first year, and a lot of those bills are not going anywhere because he doesn't really have others who are in that same place as he is on this stuff. And so I think part of this is an attempt to figure out if there are other people who agree with him, if there are others he can bring over to his side. But yeah, I don't think that one is going to move this year, but certainly will be important for us to continue to make the case to the rest of the members of the state government committee, and in particular, Senator Brown is an important person here. He was a really good person for us to talk with last year. He understands the codes and why we need them. And so we'll keep on providing resources on that as it, I don't know if it'll even go through funnel or if it will just, kind of be a discussion piece for a couple weeks this year. And then maybe come back next year.
And there's no companion bill to that one, right? So.
No, this is just Webster.
So just to clarify, we don't have to be under like the energy code from 2021 or something to get the HERA money, Paul? I thought there was a link under the Inflation Reduction.
No, there is somewhere, and I forget whether it's the IRA now or the BIL, that has monies for state and local government for code enforcement, and you have to have an updated energy code, which means not what Iowa has. So we would have to change to access to that. And that's been part of the conversations we've had, talking with legislators about, look, if you're going to do anything with code, set something in motion, do something. Because the administrative council that generally works through the process has already recommended an update to, I think it was in 2018, Kerri?
Right.
Got stalled last year when the governor's bill, came in and was all about shifting the process to a legislative process.
Yeah, and we had heard, in the interim that maybe there was some interest in actually just going ahead with the 2018 code. It's really not that much upgraded from 2012. It's a small step in the right direction. And then all of a sudden, I think with Webster's election, then we started to hear more about this idea of just doing away with the energy code altogether. So yeah, we keep running into these problems. I think one of the things that's interesting, on Webster, I had pulled up the DOE lead tool on energy burden, which I know you all work with a lot. And Senator Webster's district appears to have a 1% average energy burden. And so I think that that's something to point to, of like, yeah, of course, Senator Webster doesn't think this is an issue. Like, people in his district aren't struggling the way folks are in other parts of the state. And so we're going to be working on, when we pull out like the districts of the different folks on state government and just sort of show like, yeah, it's maybe not an issue down in Southeast Iowa or the, Quad Cities area where he lives, but here's how it is in your area, and why you don't want to do this for your folks. Because I think right now it really is just Webster, and the more we can make that case that you don't want to go down that road with Webster, the better off we'll be.
So you mentioned the reduction bill. Would the code thing affect the microgrid stuff that I'm working on in the water and wastewater industry?
I don't think so, but
Would
I'm not
you
sure.
still be able to get that money
I
without?
think so. Yeah. That was a really specific linkage to funding. But it's to get that money and have an updated code. Only the state can update the code. And yet the local governments also would want that money. So the state is essentially precluding, cities from or on up to Des Moines from accessing these federal dollars for code enforcement because we don't have an updated code. Kerri, we've covered some deregulation issues and a couple of good bills that are maybe wishful thinking, but the integrated resource planning and the virtual net metering. Covered the interesting building code and the governor's reorganization efforts that would damage potentially the OCA. I don't want to forget to touch on siting. With going into this session, we were very worried about some serious restrictions on utility scale renewable energy siting. There's been a solar siting restrictive bill out and a wind, the SF2, which may not be happening, but can you update us on those two?
Sure. Yeah. So, the wind bill didn't go anywhere. It's kind of the same thing that Senator Zahn has introduced for a number of years now. And then on the solar siting bill, we understand that, it did go through the subcommittee despite a lot of opposition. And then there was some back and forth between basically Mid-American and the Farm Bureau of, a couple of offers back and forth between those two groups. But that no agreement was reached. And so we don't think that this is going to move forward at all this year. They're just too far apart. So.
And that's a good thing. We should at least recognize that. Because energy districts and many of you and environmental council and many folks have been working hard on siting for a long time, county by county as well as at the state level. And we have a lot of legislators who are pretty well educated on that issue now. So the fact that it's not happening in the worst way that could happen and that has happened in some of the Midwestern states,
Yeah.
at least is a good thing. So
Yeah, for sure. It is. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a question in the chat. There's been some movement on the state's commissions being convinced that aggregators of retail customers, ARCs, should be enabled, i.e. new Michigan legislation, and Voltus is aggressively pursuing in other MISO states. Do we have ears in the organization of MISO states, OMS, to track each state and how they are trending?
So not on this particular issue. I have heard the same, that the aggregators are ramping up, and there was a FERC order that I think enabled this, but my brain is too fuzzy to try to talk about it right now. Andy, do you know anything more about the aggregator piece?
no, I don't.
Okay, we would love to see it. 220. Yeah, thank you, Dan. So, and I think that is also part of what might be driving this innovative rates piece as well, is that some really large companies might want to actually participate in MISO as an interruptible resource or a flexible resource, which again, we think would be fantastic. But then just the flip side of like, what about all maybe that's a standalone thing. Maybe that's something we do through the energy efficiency and demand response dockets and not have this whole other piece. But they did, folks did talk about the desire to potentially participate in the MISO market.
Well, and so that's a little different than the economic alliance efforts too, but for the large industrials that want to direct market access simply for wholesale energy, is anything happening there?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I haven't seen or heard any indication that there's going to be a bill this year. And they've just been very, very quiet in all conversations. I think that it's a hard arena for the tech customers to operate up at the Capitol with just some of the, people don't necessarily see them as a good political ally. So I don't see it coming, but we'll see. It's 2 weeks before funnel, so anything can happen.
Any other questions? I want to circle back then, since we've got you just for at least a few more minutes, to where you started with the EPB, the emissions plan and budget, the bill to essentially nullify that every other year currently required docket, where the utilities need to come and show essentially the economic viability of their fossil fuel generation, and an emissions related improvements plan, which has been around for a long time, long before the current climate conversations and the current coal plant closures have been a hot topic. But now this requirement and this docket is a hot topic because of the real spotlight on fossil fuels and emissions and the economic viability. Can you talk a little bit more about the fact that Mid-American is in the middle of or wrapping up an EPB docket right now, which is what they're trying to kill, so they'll never have to do it again. and what's been learned in that docket.
Yeah, I mean, so the 2020 EPB, our organizations, IEC, ELPC, and Sierra Club challenged the board's approval of that EPB based on the fact that Mid-American had not compared continuing to just spend money on the plants to any sort of alternative compliance mechanisms. And so that is actually this spring supposed to be in arguments before the Supreme Court in Iowa. And that is what Mid-American is trying to undercut. The district court did not see things our way, and so we did appeal those decisions. And so part of what was being said by Mid-American and the board in these dockets was that that Mid-American, the history of this shows that basically they just get to present their plan, and that it doesn't require this sort of wholesale analysis. But we definitely disagree with that. We think the language is very different than that. And so that's why we continued to appeal and why the Supreme Court took the case and how it ended up there. So typically you don't see the legislature jump in the middle of a case that's before the Supreme Court. But that doesn't seem to be an issue with what's in front of us. So yeah, we just, one of the things we were talking about in the House as well is that, every 2 years, okay, like maybe it doesn't need to be every 2 years that folks come in for an EPB docket if they don't have anything really that they're doing that's significant to any of their plants. We can see how, maybe it's like everybody's spending time on this when they may not need to. But one thing we were advocating for in the House was to put some sort of threshold into the bill so that, say, if a utility was planning capital expenditures of more than $25 million, that then the utility would have to come in and get those pre-approved by the board. And so, what Mid-American was telling folks up at the Capitol was that they would still have to come in if they were going to spend money. And that is just not true. That is not at all what the bill says. It's very clear. The language is very clear that it is at their sole discretion for them to come in to the board for approval. And so, we, and we will continue to try to make the case in the Senate that sure, like, let's do that. Like, let's do what they say that the bill does, and create a threshold for approval if we're going to scale back some of this coming in every other year. Let's make sure that if they're spending a lot of ratepayer money, that there's oversight up front.
And so are there key targets for discussion on that bill? Because like you say, it passed the House, right? The Senate is where it's at. So
Yeah.
efforts.
Yeah, I think that, Senator Klimisch is obviously a major target for that. I would say Senator Brown as well, being the chair of the Commerce Committee. Senator Klimisch was on the subcommittee. He was on the subcommittee for the bill, pretty sure. There's also the fellow who chaired the subcommittee, Senator Busolo from Ankeny. But I'm not sure. I don't know. I think it's really important that everyone be educated about the potential consumer impacts of this. I did not find him to be very open to some of the conversations earlier. We are also working on just folks who live, some of the new folks, especially from rural areas, who understand that the utilities are not necessarily our best friend, that, you know, they have a profit motive and that they, that at the end of the day, it's, you know, their constituents, on the smaller end of things who are going to pay the price if there's not oversight. So we've still been, there's so many new members that we're still sort of combing through. We're going to be doing a lot of meetings with folks tomorrow, and in the coming weeks, just to try to start to put together more people who are open to these conversations. We, like I said, we talked to a bunch of folks in the House before the bill passed, and had probably 10 House members who were very open to hearing what we were saying, including one who had agreed to draft an amendment, but then was shut down by the person running the bill. And so people do get what we're saying, and that the lack of oversight is not good for rank and file customers.
Anybody on Zoom have questions? Any follow-up comments? There are a couple pieces in the chat. Kerri, are those anything? Or Heidi? What's that?
Yeah, we've already covered.
We've covered them. Okay. Any more questions? We can let Kerri go. There's one.
And comments, ratepayers pay for PR stunts and a deep legal bench. It's an odd relationship.
It is. Yeah. The other day I was feeling had a little time on my hands, and I just started digging through just all of the naming rights and the amount of money that's been spent around the state to put the names of our utilities on things. And I know that technically it's, you know, done through foundations or done through, you know, other means, and it's looked at as a positive contribution to the community, but it's also, you know, buying goodwill in a way that's really troublesome. So it's a really odd relationship, and it's not just in Iowa. This is really, you know, across the country.
And there's something of a growing movement across the country to get stricter on how utilities lobby and use ratepayer money. And like you said, they do it through foundations, they launder it. I mean, those are ratepayer dollars, and we're giving them a guaranteed 10% return that nobody else ever gets on anything. And then they can take that, and that's utility, all of a sudden, that's company money. They can put it in any account they want at that point, and they can put it into their foundation or otherwise use it. So yeah, a lot of questions on utility lobbying, and they've come up in Iowa in the past, but we haven't had a whole lot of impetus to do anything about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it would be an interesting conversation, though, especially given all of these anti-consumer bills that we've seen this year, and that we know that there are, you know, at least a handful of Republicans on both in the House and the Senate who are like very skeptical. It might be worth, you know, really specifically raising the issue in Iowa, just to bring that to the surface of what's really happening. Because I think, you know, so many folks are just, they don't understand, and that's understandable because we all have a lot on our minds, right? But I think it's important to raise that.
Okay, there we have no last questions here or on Zoom. We'll let you go, Kerri. I really appreciate your time and talking through the issue. So
Thanks for having me. It was great to see everyone. Take care.
okay, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And we'll go ahead and close the Zoom unless Heidi, you have anything else?
On the pitch next month.
Pitch next month. What is next month? Yes, next month we will be also having a hybrid version, correct? And we'll be talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and tax policy for renewables, especially the direct pay option for nonprofits. So this will be in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce here, the Decorah Area Chamber of Commerce. So please keep an eye out for that and join us in person if you can. If you're anywhere within driving distance of Decorah, we'll be having an interesting conversation. So anything else? All right, thanks, everyone.